death toll in Odesa continues to rise, and it's worth just pausing a moment and naming the children killed by what some officials suggest may be the debris from drones being taken out of the sky, but is still the consequence of the relentless drone and aerial strikes against civilian targets in Ukraine that seem to happen almost every single night. Timofey was 4 months old. Mark would have been 3 Sunday, today, had he lived to see that moment, and we're now hearing of a 10-year-old also killed during these attacks. Now, all of this, the backdrop to an urgent situation here on the eastern front lines. We've been seeing ourselves the intensity of the fighting around some of these frontline towns. Remember, this all started with the Ukrainian decision to pull out of Avdiivka 2 weekends ago. That said, it was planned, but it appears that their departure and their defensive lines were less well planned from what we're hearing. Now, certainly that was evident in the 3 villages to the west of Avdiivka, which Ukraine initially said were never part of their defensive plan. They were given up quite fast, but now the areas that they said they would hold as part of those new defensive lines, they're severely under threat, and there are some Russian bloggers suggesting that Russian forces are quite deep into some of these villages, that they're not that particularly consequential themselves. But what is consequential is the idea that Ukraine said it would hold the line at a certain place and has not been able to do that. And we've heard internal criticism here from soldiers on the front line. There's been a lot of it in social media too, that essentially Ukraine didn't prepare for the possibility of having to fall back in the way that it should have. Some of that might have been reflected in some, I think, strange, different comments we've heard from Alexander Syrskyi, the new military commander in Ukraine, in the job 3 weeks. He's now twice since Thursday berated his staff for essentially not being up to the job of commanding some of these forces in the Avdiivka area. He says he even made some personnel replacements. He's praised some staff and some personnel on the ground as well, but it is odd to hear a commander point the finger quite like that at a moment as desperate as this. It is desperate because a lot of the forces we talk to say they're running out of ammunition. We were with a tank unit who yesterday and this day simply did not have enough rounds to fire as much as they would normally have expected to. That is extraordinary because in the area they were with, there was a battle raging. And so these villages under increased pressure are leaving many worried that we might be seeing Russia moving forwards past Ukraine's expectations of what it could do to defend its territory, and then possibly a change in the dynamic on the battlefield. Too early to tell right now, but things are absolutely not what Ukraine hoped they would be on the battlefield. They're certainly not what they hoped they would be in terms of supply and assistance from the West, and it begins to feel as though Russia has the capacity to move forwards. Videos of their assaults show them exceptionally callous about the use of their troops, very blunt and clumsy in their tactics, but still relentless and apparently moving forwards, even if it's metre by metre. So a troubling time we're seeing here, certainly, and I think a feeling amongst the Ukrainian front lines that things are really not good, and it's not quite clear how long they can keep the status quo as it is.